Hi, welcome to another MTC Studio. My name is Kevin Orbaker. Today we're going to be taking a look at 5 steps to migrate from Oracle to SQL. This is part 3 in our 3-part series. Part 1 we looked at an overview of SQL Server. Part 2 we talked about mission critical line of business applications with SQL. But part 3 we're going to focus on how you actually get from Oracle to SQL Server with your applications and databases that you're trying to move. Today I have with me a special guest, an expert in migrating. His name is Raj Gill, and he's going to be taking us through the 5 steps. Raj?
Thank you, Kevin. Excited to be here today. As Kevin mentioned, we're going to talk about the 5 steps to migrate from Oracle to SQL Server. I'm Raj Gill, CTO of Scalability Experts. We specialize in helping customers from migrating from Oracle to SQL Server and all the applications and so forth. So why don't we dive right into it? So the 5 steps are really designed around giving customers an end-to-end process that helps them move their mission-critical applications from Oracle to SQL Server. And if you look at it, it's really around making sure that the assessment, which is the first step in the entire process, is done correctly. And then you get into the whole planning for the migration itself, which is the second step. And then the deployment of the SQL Server environment and migrating the customers from Oracle to that deployed environment. And then most importantly, making sure that the new environment is validated and tested properly to make sure that it's meeting all the SLAs and the performance requirements and the application requirements. And finally, doing the production cutover. So we're going to talk about these steps in more detail as we go. So let's just go into the first key step. Now, I would say this is probably one of the most important steps from what we have seen working with customers who are looking to migrate from Oracle. Because the assessment really feeds all of the information into the next steps. And in the assessment, you really want to make sure, what are you really migrating? So as you all know, if you're running Oracle in your environment, Oracle comes in many, many different flavors and many, many different versions. For example, you may have an Oracle RAC implementation, you may have an Exadata implementation, OBIEA implementation, which is the data warehouse Oracle implementation, or a standard relational database implementation. Now, on top of that Oracle, you have your applications, which bring their own complexities. For example, you may have third-party applications, vendor apps that you have heavily customized. You may also have in-house applications where you have legacy code. Some of the documentation on the code may not be available. So what's important in the assessment step is to make sure that we look at an inventory of all of the Oracle databases, what versions they are, what is the type of implementation of Oracle, and all the application and middle layer components so that we can really prepare our next steps for migration. So one of the tools we're going to talk about is SSMA as we go forward in this talk, which is very useful in this step. But in addition to that, we also use questionnaires where we talk to the application owners, the business owners, to identify complexities which may be inherent in the application that we have to look at and make sure we're taking into consideration when we're planning the migration.
So Raj, you mentioned the questionnaire. What exactly, I mean, is that something that's part of a template, or is that something that you can download, or is that something that maybe you developed, or I'm trying to understand that questionnaire itself, what the background is to that and how you get to
it. Yeah, that's a great question. So the questionnaire is nothing more than basically some information that you want to gather, and we have designed this for customers, but it's a very simple, as you can see, it basically breaks down information for an application owner to fill out around, what is the application coded in? Are you using dynamic PLSQL? What kind of drivers are being used? What kind of, is it a Java application, .NET application? Is there specific third-party components that are being used to do connectivity with Oracle? So these are the things that you want to make sure that you don't overlook. So it's designed to basically complete the information that is required to plan a migration.
Doesn't catch anybody out at the end.
Absolutely. Good question.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
So once we look at the assessment, it's very important to also make sure that you have a proper application plan for that migration. So typically when we look at applications, it's very important to do a code review, for example, and make sure that we understand all of the different aspects of the application in the middle tier that needs to be converted, and also we can rank the application and the Oracle database from a complexity point of view. And the SSMA tool, which again we're going to talk about a little bit more, is very handy because it automates a lot of the conversion information. For example, it looks at all the objects in the Oracle schema, it looks at all the conversion complexities and helps you understand whether most of these objects or data can be converted automatically or it needs to be handled manually.
Raj, just real quick, so you mentioned SSMA. I know you're going to talk about it later, but can you maybe tell people what that is, or is it something we have to buy, or what is SSMA?
So SSMA stands for SQL Server Migration Assistant. It's a free tool available from the Microsoft site, and we're going to actually look at it in more detail going forward. But it's available free for customers to download, and there's no cost to it. It's very easy to install and configure. And then once you install it, you can basically connect to any of your Oracle source databases, and then run the tool, and it basically spits out some very nice reports that allow you to understand what objects can be automatically converted, what data can be converted, and if there are any complexities that you may have to consider.
Great. That's
a good question. All right, so and again, when we're talking about the assessment, since it's such an important step of the entire migration process, it's really important that once we collect all the information in the assessment, that we define a timeline for the migration, because the assessment tells you basically by application or by or should tell you what the complexity is, and based on the complexity you can design your timeline for the actual migration. And the reason this is important is that oftentimes customers pick actually a more complex application to begin with. And that may not be the case because you want to learn as you go. So
Start simple, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when you stack rank these applications and databases, you can actually know, okay, what is the low-hanging fruit? What's the easy to migrate? And that's the best place to start, because that, and as you start migrating and you getting more experience, your team gets more empowered. You have better scripts and tools to work with, and you're better prepared to deal with more complex applications that might be available. The other thing is that if you're using third-party applications, for example, you want to make sure that the application vendor supports SQL Server, for example. And you also want to make sure that if you have done heavy customization, that you take that into account in terms of how that customization will be migrated to SQL Server. And as I mentioned earlier, Oracle comes in very different flavors. You have a data warehouse implementation, you have a rack implementation, you have an Exadata implementation. Each one has its own complexities, and you want to make sure that you really identify clearly, don't want to go and tackle the more complex ones initially, kind of tackle the more easier ones and learn your way, and then you're better prepared to kind of move forward.
Does SSMA, does that help kind of identify maybe the low-hanging fruit? If I look at a particular implementation and say, well, there's really nothing to change here, like it'll just migrate on its own, would that be an example of something simple that you can start with,
absolutely.
cut your teeth, more or less?
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. So yeah, the SSMA is very instrumental because what it does is it connects to a database instance and looks at all the schemas underneath that instance. And then it can help you understand object by object what it can automatically convert. And what you'll have to manually convert. So it absolutely helps you by database instance looking at the complexity of each migration.
Perfect.
Absolutely. So let's talk about step 2. So step 2 is where you actually start your migration. So what we have done in step 1 is we have assessed the Oracle environment and the application environment on all of the dependent components. And now we have all of the information. We have stack ranked our Oracle instances and application by complexity. And we want to kind of start with low complex applications and then move our way upwards. Now we're going to actually start planning on how we're going to migrate these applications and databases from Oracle to SQL Server. And the very first step is that you want to define how you're going to test your migration. Because one can claim that you've migrated something correctly, but unless it's fully functional, the application is working correctly, the performance is really good, and all the SLAs are met, your migration isn't complete. So in this step, you're really planning how you're going to validate and test that migration. So the testing plan is what comes out of this step.
Okay.
So you want to come up with the criteria. You want to come up with the test. For example, one is you want to make sure that you have some basic scripts that you run that you might have captured using Oracle Trace and replay those traces on SQL Server. Another test might be that you have application users connecting to the SQL Server environment and running some of their web interface or application interface screens and making sure they're getting the correct response times and getting correct data back. And also there are other types of tests you can come up with for schema comparison, for data concurrency, row counts and stuff like that. So it really depends on the level of complexity you want to build into the migration validation, but this is a step where you have to really make sure that you are coming up with the proper test to validate that migration. Now remember, what we are not worried about here is the actual load testing of the application. That we'll deal with it later on. Okay. But what we want to do is all the functional testing and all of the testing that basically tells the business owner that yes, this application works just like it works in Oracle. Right. Is what we want to accomplish.
Some of your traditional UAT, user acceptance
absolutely.
testing.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, again, when we are preparing for migration, you also want to think about, okay, how are you going to actually do the migration? So a lot of the scripts that may be necessary to do the automation, building up your pre-deployment SQL Server environment. What is your cutover plan that is going to be necessary? Mitigation strategy in case something goes wrong, and you want to have a rollback plan, and make sure that you have a very robust project plan because a lot of the different divisions are involved. And Kevin, this is where we see a lot of customers struggle because oftentimes the application owners or the DBA group might lead a migration. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to the actual final deployment, you really need support from infrastructure team, you need the support from the application owners, the business owners, and everybody has to be involved and informed about the process. So it's very, very important that you have the key stakeholders identified and a very robust project plan in place to kind of plan this out.
You mentioned rollback plans. What's for most of your customers? I mean, what do you see as far as, I don't know, how much effort do they have to put in that rollback plan? I mean, is it really just leaving the server up and running, and if it fails, just point it, or because you mentioned something, especially if it's a vendor-supported app, right? They have to support both. But oftentimes on the front end, there's some significant changes, maybe even a different complete application. How would you roll? I mean, not to simplify it, I'm sure it's not just a checkbox, but rollback I can see as being a problem. Do you have any processes you do to help with that, or?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Kevin. And I think rollback, what we have seen typically comes in very, very important when we're dealing with mission-critical applications, right. Applications that are 24/7 and can't go down. And so what you want to do is you want to make sure that as you're migrating to SQL Server, one way to do have a rollback plan is to make sure that you do incremental migration. So rather than cutting off everything from Oracle and then switching over to SQL Server, that you are migrating by functionality, for example. Migrating reports, all the reporting functionality, and then gradually migrating all of the updates and inserts and batch processes.
That would also entail some kind of data consistency as well, right? Because if you're updating one platform, you want the data that might be related. Like you mentioned reports, right? If one system's just doing reports, it's got to get the data from the other system as that data comes in as well. So there's some actual integration between the two, kind of between phases.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, the good news here is that SQL Server offers a feature called change data capture.
Good.
And this feature is heavily used by customers to kind of for this rollback plan.
Okay.
Because what this does is it allows SQL Server to receive changes coming from Oracle in an incremental basis. So you can enable change data capture in Oracle, and as the data gets changed, it gets replicated to SQL Server, and then you can keep the two databases in sync. Now, there are also third-party tools that are available that allow you to have bidirectional replication. So, for example, if you're starting to make changes to SQL Server, how do you get that data, data change replicated back to Oracle? So, with the combination of features that are out of the box with SQL Server, and with some of the tools that are available, third-party tools, you can have a very, very good rollback plan for customers. Yeah.
Awesome.
So this is an example, Kevin, of a high-level project plan, and I can't emphasize enough from having done this many times over the years, is that oftentimes it's not technology that causes a migration to be not successful. It's the process, or or people not being informed, and the right people not being involved. So I'm a big proponent of having a very, very good project plan. And the reason we are sharing this with the audience is that this is a good starting point. It tells you all of the key steps you got to consider, right? From all the way from doing the analysis and planning your project to who are the different individuals within your organization that you want to be involved in this migration. So, for example, a development team, you have your DBA team, you have your QA team, your infrastructure team, your business application owners, and then what are the different tasks that each one of those groups will be responsible for. For example, the infrastructure team is really making sure that the target environment is set up properly, all of the storage and the compute is configured correctly. Or if you're actually migrating to the cloud, then you have all of those VMs and cloud components configured correctly.
Now, this timeline you have here, as an example, obviously not everybody's going to have the same timeline. What size company or what size migration, I guess, not company, but application or what have you, are we talking about here? Is this like, given this example timeline, would you say this is kind of a middle size, small? I mean, what would give a customer some idea of?
Yeah, no, great point, Gavin. And as you can see, the total duration on this 127. And I'm glad you kind of noted that, because we don't want customers to feel like every migration is going to be a piece of cake, and you just kind of click, and you're over the SQL Server.
Run the tool and you're done.
Exactly. But however, I'll tell you that this is more of a high complex migration example.
Okay.
So we want to kind of start with a higher watermark, right? So it's about 127 days of actual migration. So this is from an actual customer that we did a migration for, about 127 days of actuals from start to end. And it is a high complex application example. But it gives you an idea of not only the total time, but also the time for how much percentage time each division is going to be required to devote to this. So it's not like, for example, how much time do we need from the DBAs, and how much time do we need to allocate from the infrastructure. You have to keep one thing in mind, is that all of the individuals that are going to be involved in the migration project already have their day jobs, so they're already working, managing their current systems. So it's very important that you let them know in advance how much time over the next few months you're going to need from them in order to support the migration process. So the project plan helps define that, give them more specificity, and also allows them to plan their time to support the migration. And this is kind of the remaining part of the project plan. As you can see, it again breaks down at different levels what are the tasks the application owners have to implement, the DBAs, the QA, and also the who are the people involved in the final production rollout. So with that, let's move to step 3. This is the time. So you've done the assessment, you've got all the information, all the risk is mitigated, you've got a great migration test plan, you've got a solid team in place, you've got a project plan, you're moving along, and now it comes time to start executing and deploying the actual migration. And this is where, Kevin, I would say that the SSMA tool comes is going to play a key role, because this is where you're actually going to run the tool and identify all of the components that you'll have to manually convert. that SSMA may not be able to convert automatically. And so you can start planning to address how those components that will be migrated manually, who's going to do what, and assign those tasks, and also deal with complexities that are a part of the data conversion or building out the pre-production environment for the migration itself. Now, when it comes to migrating the data, one of the things we have seen is that SSMA has a great capability inbuilt where it can not only migrate the schema from Oracle and all the objects, but it can also migrate the data. However, it's very common in Oracle that customers have large amounts of data. And when you're talking about mission critical data and you have very limited downtime available to switch over or cut over, you want to make sure you have an alternative plan in place. An SSIS, which is a SQL Server integration services, it comes with SQL Server, allows you to kind of have that option. And as you can see on this slide, I mean, it allows you to essentially parallelly load large amounts of data from a single table or load multiple tables at the same time over the SQL Server. We see SSIS in some cases cutting the load time by over 300%.
Over SSMA?
Over SSMA, absolutely.
Okay.
SSMA is great when it comes to smaller size databases. I would say 50 to 100 GB. Anything that is over 100 GB, I would say that you should look at SSIS package. It's very easy to use. You just have to connect to. It comes with a pre-built Oracle connector. Right. You connect to Oracle and use the parallel loading feature and migrate your data to SQL Server.
Now, from a script perspective, SSIS, obviously you write scripts, you build them. Does SSMA give you any ability to maybe take what it scripted out to do and actually implement it via SSIS, or do you have to basically start from scratch and build it yourself?
Yeah, great question. So SSMA actually has its own inbuilt scripting mechanism to do the loading. So there isn't much that you can take from SSMA and then bring it into an SSIS package. The loading piece is where SSIS has its own parallel load feature, for example, that you basically right-click on the data pump and say, I want to have 10 threads active to load this, or I want to load X number of tables in parallel, and it does it for you. So it's very, very easy to use.
So if SSMA maybe scripts out the objects and the table objects and triggers or what have you, and let it do that, but then the actual data migration, you're really focused on SSIS to do that bulk.
Absolutely,
right? Okay.
Yeah. So it's a great point. So SSMA will build all the scripts to make sure that all the objects are converted, and it will do the data loading as well, or migration as well. And again, for the most part, it does a very good job.
Right.
But only in cases where you have large amounts of data and you have a very small window for cutover, SSIS can really speed things up for you.
Perfect. Yeah.
And so another example of using SSIS, the question you brought up earlier, Kevin, is about what's a rollback plan, right? Mm-hmm. So SSIS integrates very well with Oracle. So its Oracle connector is aware of the change data capture. So you could actually use SSIS integrated with change data capture feature on the Oracle side and bring that incremental change over to SQL Server. So for example, the SSIS package can pick up every 5 minutes all the changes that are sitting in the change data capture store in Oracle, brings it in, and then sends it back to, inserts it into SQL Server
for kind of longer term testing too. It also possibly, I don't know, but could give you an opportunity to verify that as more new data pumps in, you're going to be assured that SQL Server is configured right to handle that new data as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even before cutover.
Exactly, and then that's a very good point, because in many cases we see that once you have done the migration, the testing time can be fairly long. And to your point, this can be very, very beneficial because it's bringing that live data into that test environment. So your users can actually say, hey, I just ran this query on Oracle. It ran it, it gave me 100 rows, and it gives me same number of rows. Data matches on SQL Server. everything is great. Or I run it on Oracle, it takes 10 seconds, and SQL Server it takes 5 seconds. Great, SQL is performing very well. So I mean, yeah, absolutely. And the more testing you can do with real data, the more risk-free migration you can do.
Kind of some confidence building too.
Absolutely, yeah. It's all about migration. Is all about, Kevin, about confidence building and about mitigating all the risk. There are no surprises. You don't want any surprises or risks to come up at the time of the cutover. That's where things can go wrong. So the more planning you can do, and make sure your assessment is really good, you have a good migration plan, and your deployment strategy is pretty solid. You're using the right tools like SSIS, which can give you a lot of benefits, and SSMA, and the better your migration can go.
Great.
So one of the things in the deployment piece that is very important is now we're talking about, and this is very, very important for Oracle customers, because they're running mission critical applications, they're running tens of terabytes of data. Some of the apps may have thousands of concurrent users, and sometimes it can be very challenging to replicate that environment on the SQL Server side, other than just going live, right?
Right.
So this is where a proper load testing or performance testing it comes in very, very handy, or it becomes very important. So this is where we encourage customers to make sure that they, on top of the UAT and the functional testing we talked about, there's a proper load testing plan in place in the deployment step. So this is where you would define, hey, how do I take this concurrent load test? Obviously there are third-party tools that can be used to do the load testing. Microsoft offers web stress testing tools. At the same time, you can also use some of the tools that are available in SQL Server. For example, in SQL Server 2016, you have the SQL Server trace has been enhanced to allow you to concurrently run production traces at high volumes with concurrent user activity, and those could be great tools to use in conjunction.
Great pointing out new features in SQL 2016, because I have customers that are currently using the SQL trace to add that capability of testing and load testing on new hardware that they're doing, or VMs that they're building, to make sure that they handle the load. So didn't even think about using it for migration as well.
Yeah, and many customers, Kevin, to that point are not, I just want to take a second here, because I think that what we try to do when we work with customers in helping them migrate from Oracle to SQL Server is we educate them on a lot of the out-of-the-box capability SQL Server offers. Oftentimes customers are not aware of it, whereas on the Oracle side, they might not have procured that feature because it costs them more or costs them extra, right? And they're very concerned about not raising that cost on the Oracle side. In SQL Server, when you buy the SQL Server license, all of the features come with it, especially in the Enterprise Edition of SQL Server, right? So when we are helping customers plan the migration, in order to keep the cost of the migration low, we try to use as many features that are available out of the box as SQL Server itself. CDC is a great example we talked about earlier. SQL trace replays is another feature, and there are several other capabilities in SQL Server that come very, very handy in terms of planning and testing and migrating to SQL Server from Oracle. Also, you want to plan out your cutover testing, because one is, obviously you don't want any surprises, but when you do cutover, you want to make sure that you have your final set of tests you want to do. And I'll give an example. We had one customer that was running all of the proper tests, but they had this once in a quarter batch job that nobody really thought about, and that job runs literally overnight. It takes a full night of data loads to run and complete. So what they did is they wanted to make sure that before the cutover, they had that because they couldn't run that very often. First of all, it needed real data, production data, so they had to be synchronized. Secondly, it took a whole night to run the test, so they didn't want to have the production time affected. So this was one of the tests before they did the cutover that they ran to make sure that they were all good.
So this nightly process actually ran on the SQL side.
It ran, yeah, exactly.
Even before the cutover.
Before the cutover, exactly. So you want to really, before the cutover, you want to plan for all those anomaly type of batch jobs, the ones that are not as frequent but very important, right? And you don't want to wait until later to fix issues with them. You want to make sure that before you cut over, you test those batch jobs as well.
Yeah, I had a customer that had a job that ran at night. It took 8 hours to run the job, and if it didn't run by morning, they actually had a problem. So knowing that SQL will handle that job no matter how long it takes before the day starts is probably pretty critical. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. So step 4, as we talk about progressing our migration, 5-step migration process, is again coming back to the idea that you want to have a pretty solid plan to test your application. And if you notice, Kevin, as we go through these tests, we focus so much on testing and validation. And as I said earlier, a lot of things can go wrong if you don't really have a robust testing validation plan. So in every step of the migration, you want to really bring in that piece and make sure you have proper planning, the tools. So in this step, you're really making sure that all of the tests that need to be done from performance and scalability and user acceptance are done correctly. And I'll tell you another reason why this step is called out separately. In order for a migration cutover to be sanctioned by a customer's internal departments, you need a sign-off.
Yeah.
Right. So you want to make sure you get a sign off from the application owners, and they will probably need to see, hey, what are the tests you ran, and what were the results, so they can sign off on it.
Right.
So we tend to formalize this so that we can run proper tests for the infrastructure team, for the application team, for the business owners, and then get sign off from them so they're happy, they're satisfied with the results, and then they can basically sanction or approve the cutover. So again, just another important thing to cut over. Now, finally, Kevin, step 5 is the time where cutover happens, right? So this is where you want to not make sure you don't want to be keeping your fingers crossed and going into this, right? You want to keep your thumbs up and doing your migration cutover, because you've done all the due diligence,
right.
You've done all the risk mitigation, the testing, and the validation. And that's the whole idea about this 5-step process, because it's a very robust and very inclusive of making sure that every migration is a successful migration. So when we talk about the cutover, let's talk about a couple of scenarios that we have seen. So one is for the very easy type of migrations, you could take a downtime and you can just do a cutover, and everything is working great, and you've done all the tests, and you map your applications to the SQL Server, and things are working great. And then you have your medium complexity applications, where when you're doing the cutover, you probably want to do real-time data replication beforehand. So using CDC, for example, right. And making sure that all of the applications are running in parallel. Mm-hmm. So they're running on Oracle, and for, let's say, 30 days, they're also running on SQL Server. So, mm-hmm. So the users are getting comfortable, data is being replicated, so they're looking at real data. And the next level is the high complexity, right? So those cutovers are a little bit more complicated. And that's where we see customers doing a piecemeal migration of their Oracle components. So for example, they'll simply take the reporting functionality from Oracle, move it to SQL Server. Data is still replicated real time, and then they start bringing some of the updates and moving it to SQL Server and batch jobs and things like that. So the cutover doesn't have to be, the point here is, the cutover doesn't have to be, oh my God, I've got to turn off my Oracle, turn on my SQL Server, and pray everything is going to go well.
Right, it's not all or nothing.
All or nothing,
right.
Exactly. So you have different levels of cutovers that you can deploy. And again, this is where assessment, I go back to the step 1 we discussed, is so important. Because the assessment, if you've done it right, actually tells you where you need to use what type of cutover.
Right.
For example, it ranks all your Oracle and applications by complexity, right? Yeah. Not somebody, Raj thinks that this application is very complex. Because honestly, when we talk to the application owners in customers, our experience is that every application owner says, my app is very complex. You're not going to be able to migrate, right?
Right.
So in the assessment, we actually look deep into the application, deep into the database, and break it down in a very simple terms to the application owners and say, hey, look, out of 1,000 objects, we only see 50 objects that need to be manually converted. And we see only 1,000 lines of code in the application that needs to be converted out of hundreds and thousands of lines of code. And that really resonates with them. So investing in the assessment really allows you to plan these steps very carefully, because this is another place where things can go wrong. So if you don't have a proper cutover plan for the right type of application, right, then once you cut over, you don't have a rollback plan, you don't have the proper mitigations, then things can go really wrong, and we don't want that to happen, right?
Absolutely.
So. With that, Kevin, let's talk about some of the process and the tools.
Okay. We talked about SSMA quite a bit. Maybe we can see a little bit of that now, or
absolutely. And actually, there are a couple of other tools that we're going to talk about that are available free from Microsoft that are very, very useful. And so let's take a look at the whole migration process with the perspective of the tools, right? So we're going to do the assessment, as we talked about earlier.
So from this slide, obviously we can see SSMA is used for various stages of it as well. It's not just the end part. It's part of the assessing, right? Being able to use that tool to do some assessment, pre-assessment, to say, hey, looks like these databases are going to be difficult. These are going to be easier, as you mentioned. What of all the scripts or of all the tables and objects, here's what can and can't be automated and what's manually done. So even at the assessment, we're using it. We mentioned a map tool is here as well. You want to explain what map is as well?
Yeah, absolutely. The Microsoft Assessment and Planning tool is another tool that is, it actually is fairly robust, and it does a lot of things, but let's focus on just the Oracle piece itself.
Sounds good.
So it has the ability, essentially, to go into your network environment and detect all your Oracle instances on Linux and on Windows, and come back with some very useful information on the Oracle environment. Now, many customers may have the Oracle inventory and that information already in place, so they may not need to run maps. But oftentimes when we talk to customers, and a customer says, "Yeah, I'm very interested in migrating from Oracle to SQL Server, but I don't know where to start. I don't know how many Oracles I have. I don't know what versions I have. I don't know which applications are using which Oracle schemas. How do I map dependencies?" And this is where maps really comes in handy. So you could use map to really go and look at a specific data center or a specific network segment, or your entire network segment, or entire domain, and come back with all of the Oracle instances, what versions they are, and what applications are using that Oracle, and also it captures some performance data as well, which is very helpful and handy in designing your target architecture in SQL Server. For example, it will tell you how many CPUs it has, how many cores, how much memory that box is running, whether it's virtual or whether it's physical, and some high-level performance metrics that can help you size the target environment in SQL Server. So this is something that SSMA doesn't do, that map can really do very well for you. So typically we start off and ask the customer the question, do you really have a good inventory and performance metrics on your Oracle environment? If the answer is no, then maps can be a great tool to bring in and run in the customer environment.
Another free tool?
It's a free tool. It's a free tool for Microsoft, downloadable, and there's no cost to it. And then once we have the inventory information, that's where the SSMA really comes in. And you're absolutely right, Kevin. I mean, SSMA plays a role across the board in the entire process, right? Because it not only does the assessment of what it's going to take to convert and migrate, but actually does the migration. So when you're ready to deploy the actual migration, it can help convert that to your pre-production environment. And also it has some testing capability. It can actually do some basic test validation for you out of the box, and help you design that migration in the best way possible. So we're going to talk about SSMA a little bit more. The other tool we talked about earlier is SQL Server Integration Services. So this is a great tool where its focus really is around data migration. So that's where SSIS is really, really helpful. And data migration, as you mentioned earlier, is not just for when you're ready to do a cutover, but to actually synchronize data from Oracle SQL Server consistently to while you're doing your testing and you're doing your validation. So as we mentioned, Maps is a free tool. It's available. It does your database discovery. It has many, many, many features, and it can really allow you to get a good count of your Oracle environment and also your SQL Server environment. But and then, SQL Server Migration Assistant is available in different flavors. I know we're focusing on the Oracle migration, but SSMA is also available for Sybase migration for customers who are interested in migrating from Sybase or from DB2 or MySQL or Access to SQL Server. The other important thing, Kevin, that SSMA does that I've seen getting a lot of attention from customers is that also it can help you migrate to Azure directly.
Oh.
So if you are a customer that's looking to migrate from Oracle and you want to migrate to SQL Server, but you want to have that SQL Server in Azure,
right?
It can actually do that for you. So we really love the fact that when we work with customers, we can not only give them a strategy for an on-prem migration, but also a strategy for a cloud migration with SSMA.
A lot of customers are migrating to the cloud today, so why not do it when you're moving a database as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And as the SSMA builds a lot of the information from Oracle environment, it has a very good reporting mechanism as well. So it comes back and reports, in a very easy to understand, what are the objects it was successfully able to convert. So it gives you a percentage. So for example, I can look at the report and say, hey, 99% of the objects were automatically converted. There's only 1%. That's great news, right? Even 90% is great news.
Right.
Now it goes a step further. It actually then calculates what is going to be the effort in man hours to do the conversion of those objects that it couldn't convert automatically. I'll just say that with one caveat. We usually have found that SSMA over provisions those hours. So typically, from our experience,
makes too many hours.
Yeah, right. It's
probably a good thing.
A safer bet. It's taking a safer bet, and not it rather overestimate the hours than underestimate the hours, because But what we have seen is that, and this is again going back to the low complexity. Start with the low complexity migrations and then move your way up, because then you get more efficient, you get better process, you
also learn.
Yes. Absolutely. And then you can get really, really good at it when it comes to the medium complex and high complex migrations. Typically, as a rule of thumb, Kevin, we have seen that we can cut the number of hours that SSMA has estimated by almost 50%.
Really, so in half.
In half. So I would just tell customers that when you look at the report from SSMA and it comes up with lots of hours to convert, don't panic. There's a lot of room for you to really. It's trying to be a little bit liberal in terms of the effort, and it's designed that way. But you
don't want to underestimate, and then all of a sudden it's 10 times longer than you think too. So,
yeah. But generally, you can take that number and cut it in half, or less is typically what you will see it'll take to do the migration. So, but the reporting capabilities are very, very good. The other good thing about SSMA is that it actually is very project-based. So if you're a developer, you have used Visual Studio, or many of the development tools today come with the whole concept of I build a project, and then I circulate that project around with different people who do different components and different pieces to it. It actually builds a project. You build a project in SSMA, and then you give people access to that project. And within that project, all of the information that you need for the migration is stored. So I'll give you an example where this is very handy. So imagine if you have 100 Oracle applications that you're trying to migrate, right? Now each application migration is going to require different people from the application side, from the DBA side, from the infrastructure side to be involved. What you could do is you could create either one project for all of the 100 migrations, which I wouldn't recommend. It doesn't make sense. Or you could make a project plan for each migration.
Sure.
And then the individuals who are involved in that migration have access to that project, and then they can kind of look at where we are and what it takes to do the conversion. So I think this is very, very useful from a manageability and operational efficiency point of view in terms of doing migrations when it comes to a large number of migrations in an environment. And again, it has a lot of capabilities around exploring the objects online. Has a database explorer feature. Also, you can look at schema migrations, all the objects, data migration issue, and it comes up with some platform extensions as well that allow you to integrate with SSIS, for example, or integrate with some other Microsoft tools to kind of trigger that workings. So when you look at the migrations, you want to look at what can SSMA automatically convert, number one, what will have to be manually converted, and then what are the custom mappings that you will have to do between Oracle and SQL Server. And the data migration, on the data migration side, obviously you could use SSMA or you could use SSIS. Well,
that comes back to what you said earlier about some things you want to use SSMA for data, but the bigger loads you probably want to just focus on SSIS for that. So.
Yeah, exactly. Now, one other thing I want to point out where, again, as we get into some more complexities around migrations of certain data types, some customers, as they learn about the capabilities of SQL Server, they want to use those capabilities. They just don't want to migrate from Oracle to SQL Server. For example, SQL Server has very robust XML support. Data type support, and very good blob storage support as well. And customers who have not traditionally used XML data types want to take some of the data types and convert it into an XML data type for you. So in SSIS, you can do that custom mapping. So you can actually, in the transformation itself, say, hey, you know what? Don't bring it to whatever is the best equivalent SQL Server. I want it to be this.
Actually translate
it and force that translation, which allows them to come to a better state in SQL Server. So SSIS can be very, very useful in not only dealing with large amounts of data, but also complexity where you want to get to a better state in SQL Server side and do some transformations as well. So that's
not just purely a lift and shift, but maybe some actual advancements that might have been on the roadmap for the Oracle side, but now that they're migrating, it's a good opportunity to do that as well.
Absolutely.
Potentially. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep. And again, like I said, one of the things that we find very, very attractive to customers today. In fact, Kevin, I can tell you that we see more customers looking to migrate from Oracle to SQL Server because they look at SQL Server as better integrated with Azure or cloud. Right? It can be a bit challenging to go to the cloud journey if you have a very complex set of Oracle applications. And SQL Server is so seamlessly integrated, and most of the customers are already on the path to go to the cloud. So they look at this as, hey, it's not only going to help me save money by going to SQL Server, but I'm going to be cloud ready, right? And this is where it's almost become very common. So when we work with customers, we help them identify their migration strategy for on-prem as well as for Azure, so they can actually compare side by side. For example, when you look at going to the Azure side, you essentially don't need all of the CapEx expenses, right? For all the hardware gear that you need and all of that, the data center cost. And your cost of running that environment could be substantially low. You move from CapEx to OpEx. So that itself can be very attractive. So we find some of the kind of easy to migrate applications as very good candidates for Azure migrations, and customers get very, very excited. As I mentioned earlier, the SSMA tool allows you to have that assessment done as well for on-prem as well as SQL Azure. So, I mean, if you want to get started, you can go down to the Azure portal, set up an account and just provision a VM and start doing some of the migrations. And
it's free. You get $200 free to play with.
Great.
When you sign up.
Absolutely.
I think that's still the case.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And actually spinning up a SQL VM, if you don't know, if you've never stood up SQL, right? If you're primarily an Oracle shop and you may not know best practices of SQL, there's VMs already built that have SQL Enterprise running, and they're built to best practices and ready to go in production environment as is. So yeah, definitely a way to go if you're first time SQL shop as well.
Absolutely.
Even from dev test, even if they want to just use, if they plan on even having SQL on premises, right? There still might be an opportunity for them to spin up quickly a SQL environment just to get the feel for it, start to see what that migration might look like, but ultimately still bring it on local.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So I know we have talked about the process, the tools and stuff quite a bit. Why don't we just dive right into the SSMA and take a look at how this tool works?
SSMA.
Exactly. Yes. I know we talked about it so much. So here, I've got the SSMA running as a migration assistant for Oracle, and basically you can start a new project. As I mentioned, it's all project based. So you basically create a project, give it a name, and then you can allow different users to have access to that project. And you can create it on a SQL Server, whatever version you're migrating to. This is going to be your target.
So it knows the target and knows what its capabilities are on the target.
Yes,
for
absolutely.
SQL. So when it's doing the migration, it's not only just assessing SQL, but it's assessing each version of SQL that you might be migrating to. So latest version being 2016, as an example, that would show up on the list of targets.
Yeah, absolutely. And so here, I'm basically connecting to an Oracle environment. So as you can see, I have basically the Oracle instance name, server name, and then I have the credentials, and then I can from the SSMA, I can connect to an Oracle instance. And once I connect to the Oracle instance, as you will see, it starts processing all of the information that it finds in the Oracle environment. For example, all of the different schemas and all of the different objects under that schema, and start populating that information in the Oracle, in the Explorer, so that you can actually
so on the Explorer pane, we have the upper part, which is the Oracle side, and then on the lower part, I'm assuming then it's going to show us what the equivalent SQL components would be?
Yes, absolutely. So it basically tells you what are the things that it can automatically migrate versus what are the things that will need some manual intervention. So right now I've got the connections. Mm-hmm. And then to Oracle, so I can see the different schemas. So there are a bunch of different schemas. And if I select a schema, I can see all the objects. I can see the functions, for example. And this is something that you can also do. Migration doesn't have to be that you take all the objects and migrate them over. Okay, it can also be piecemeal. So for example, and we have seen customers do this. So for example, some of the applications have multiple schemas.
Okay.
And or use multiple schemas.
Right.
And customers might be interested in just taking one functionality of the application, which is based on a schema. And so you can just migrate one schema out of the entire instance, or within that schema, you could just migrate specific objects. Okay. We had one customer recently that the application team was very concerned about some of the store procedure code that's written in Oracle PLSQL. Right. And they said, hey, before we even start looking at entire migration, we know we'll run into problems with this code that is very, very complex. Can we just run the SSMA on that and see how much effort it is?
Right, for those to rewrite
exactly
PSQL to T-SQL, yeah. That's what we call it, right?
So what we did is we just started up a project in SSMA, and we took those store procedures, and we did the conversion, and there were some manual things that we had to do, but and then we shipped that project to them, and they could open up the project and actually look at, oh, okay, here's everything converted to SQL Server. Here are the things I have to manually do. They actually did those things manually. It took them very little time. And then they started testing the store procedure to make sure it was giving them the right type of results on SQL and Oracle. So, I mean, again, migration can go at a pace you want, and also it can be very object-based. So it doesn't have to be everything or nothing.
So let's test that it can get the tables, the
Exactly.
schema of the tables done. Then let's test to see if we can actually do the store procedures and the various different layers of it, and kind of check them off in that level as well, not just the whole database, for instance.
And we also find, Kevin, this to be a very good way to build confidence in the organization, right? So when we engage with the application owners, we ask them, hey, what are you concerned about? And oftentimes they're able to rattle off, here are the 5 things that we don't think you can convert or will not convert, right? So let's take a look at that, right? And then we quickly can go into SSMA, can kind of look at the conversion of those objects, and then look at how much the manual effort is and how exactly to handle those components, right? So as you can see here, I mean, it's you can you pick all the different functions. Materialized views, you've got packages, you've got procedures, sequences. You can drill down and you can actually look at and pick and choose each one of them, and then start looking at making sure that none of the objects are missing. And typically we haven't seen any issues, but sometimes if you have a large number of objects in a schema, we have seen that some of the, in the Explorer, some of the objects that may not show up. And this is where I think it's important to understand that SSMA is just like a client tool, right? So, and it uses its memory cache in the tool itself, in executable. So if you're running SSMA on a VM that has, I don't know, maybe 100 megabytes of memory or very little memory, or you're running it on a machine where it is very, very, it doesn't have all the horsepower.
Right.
It can be very, very difficult to look at all the objects. So it brings everything into the cache of the client.
So let's make sure we have a fairly adequate box allocated to do this portion of it as well. Not just whatever's left over.
Exactly. So exactly, you're right. And oftentimes when customers run that and they see, hey, I'm not seeing everything that I want to see, and like SSMA doesn't work for me. Like, hey, wait a minute, this is just like any other client tool, right? So if you've got thousands and thousands of objects, it has to go read all that data, bring it into cache, and allow you to kind of look at it. So if it's behaving a little bit a specific object or schema, and you can run the report, as you can see. It's actually
so at
telling
this point
you,
we're just running a report, not migrating anything.
No, we're just running the report. That's typically anything we see over 80% is good news, right?
Right.
90% and higher is great news, and 95 and higher is super great news, right? So
do you ever see 100?
So they're very. We do see. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, especially to your point, vendor apps that are supporting both SQL and Oracle.
They tend to be a little bit more generic,
absolutely,
so simple to migrate.
Absolutely. So they use data types because they have to support multiple disparate database systems in the back end. So they're very good about having data types or schemas that are very compatible, interchangeable, right? So that's where we find most
lowest common denominator, more or less, between the two systems or multiple systems.
Absolutely. So and then at the bottom you can see where it found the error and what the error is. Now we're not going to go through a lot of the details around each error, but this is a one screen where it gives you really nice information. By the way, these reports are all XML based. Oh, okay. So they're stored in a portal in a folder that SSMA has, and basically you can go there and import information into a table if you want, and start analyzing it that way. We have customers who like doing that, so building some Power Pivots on top of it.
Their own reports on it.
Exactly. Say, hey, show me errors by applications that are in one data center.
Right.
Or show me 90% and higher by department, things like that. So the good news is all of this data is very easily portable. So you could either use, so what we are looking at is the reporting interface in SSMA, but you're not limited to this. All of this data is sitting in XML, and you just imported it very easily into any format you want, and start analyzing and slicing and dicing it. So it's very easy that way. And as you notice, it also, for each error, tells you how many man hours it takes to convert.
I was looking at
that.
So
say 29 and so forth. So again, like I said, don't don't get too concerned if you see these hours add
Hundreds
up.
of hours add up, yes.
Typically, you could do it much faster.
I'm assuming that's also making some assumptions that potentially the user who's doing this either doesn't have experience with migration, maybe it's their first time, so it's buffering some hours for that as well.
So you're absolutely right, Kevin, and that's exactly
Unlike
right.
having an expert such as yourself there that can maybe plow through these a little bit easier.
Yeah, and as you can see, you can drill down on each of these error and actually see what that error is, where it occurred,
right.
and so forth and so on. I think that it's a really fantastic way to start planning your migration and looking at what you're dealing with and ranking your apps by complexity and starting to plan out where to start. Again, I know I mentioned this many times, but one of the main reasons we see migrations fail for customers is they just have not picked the right app to begin with, right? So you got to learn your way as you go.
Maybe you run this against a few databases before you even pick one.
Exactly.
Just to get an idea, like, well, this one's at 90%, this one's at 75%. Let's see about the 90% one, especially if it's a smaller database.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kevin, as I mentioned earlier, SSMA prepares a lot of interesting data and reporting. So here's an example of where we've taken that data and built a PowerPoint presentation from it for the key stakeholders to understand, what are the key aspects of what SSMA found in terms of, what it can do automatically convert. So for example, these are all the objects that can be converted 100%, which is where some of the manual effort may be required. So it shows you great portability of that data. So you can actually take those XML reports and then create these nice PowerPoint presentations for your internal teams so everybody can digest, take a look at what are the things that we need to be looking at from a migration perspective. And here's an example of where the directory structure that SSMA creates for all the schemas. It's pretty well organized. You can find these reports in the SSMA folder. So either you can directly open it up in a browser, or you can just import it back into Excel or SQL Server.
This is where it becomes important for your projects. You mentioned at the beginning how SSMA does it in project basis. I'm assuming then this is all in the project format, right?
It absolutely is. So every project has its own folder, has its own reporting folder as well. So you can have all of this information separated, and you can start looking at this. And I think that at the end of the day, what you want to make sure is that you can transparently share information that you've gathered from this assessment with all the key stakeholders, and get them comfortable on board before you even start on the migration path. And that's key, because once everybody is excited and they can see this is doable, it's not going to take us many years and many months and hundreds of people, this is easier than what we thought, then what we have typically seen is a lot more support internally for the project, and most of the time those projects are very successful.
Well, Raj, this has been excellent. I've learned a lot today. I hope everybody, and I'm sure who's watching this today